And the news gang continues. The gang is here. Of course, one of the gangsters is away, but still following us. You'll get to hear from him a little later on. But the East African community, what is the state of the East African community? President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda is around. He tested our SGR today from Mombasa to Nairobi. He also toured the port of Mombasa. But before we go there, Linus, right of...
Yes, just arising from our first half of the conversation, we've got a message from Senator Sakaja who says, don't put us all in one basket. We also have very many fine legislators in Parliament. We also have leaders with a clear vision and mission for this country. If you see beyond the fog, listen beyond the noise, you will hear with this and clarity and purpose. Don't put them down with all the rest. And I totally do agree with Senator Sakaja. There are some really fine legislators out there. We just hope they outnumber the ones that are not.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the hashtag is newsgang, by the way, so you all can, contribute onto that, and yes, and then send us all of that. We have the right of reply. For
Absolutely. Sure. Now, what is the state of the East African community? Some of the things that were envisioned by the founders of this East African community remain unachieved. And though quite some work is being done, there's still a lot of suspicion, a lot of friction. Every so often, some fires have to be put out. Recently, President Uhuru Kenyatta was on a shuttle diplomacy mission trying to pacify the row between President Museveni of Uganda and President Kagame of Rwanda. This friction, Jamila, does it help?
It doesn't help.
The other day, excuse the pun, Tanzania burned our cheeks.
It doesn't help, Gashuri, because look at it this way. One of the main reasons why the EAC was formed was for trade, so that all the countries can benefit from the resources that we all have. But when you look at reports that say that trade among these countries has gone down by over 30%, falling by about 2.4 billion to 2.4 billion from 3.5 billion, and it's mostly because of what they are calling the non-tariff barriers, it gives you a pause and wonder why such instances. When you say that the port, when you say that there is tension between Uganda and Rwanda, it also affects everybody else. It affects Kenya, it affects Tanzania. And now, because trade is one of the main reasons why we all came into this, it means we are beating the purpose. Everyone is getting affected in one way or another. Look at the traders who trade across from Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. If you can't access Rwanda and you're a trader there, or you can't come to Uganda and you're from Rwanda, it affects you, and it has a ripple effect to other members of the community. So we need to look at it that way. Yes, the issues between Rwanda and Uganda are affecting not just those two countries, but the EAC in general.
Francis, just before I talk about the Rwanda-Uganda thing, I mean, these bilateral ties and bilateral discussions between Kenya and Uganda. And Uganda is actually Kenya's largest market. It's the biggest market. So these talks are normally very, very important. What have we been seeing coming out? We've just heard today that Kenya is going to give Uganda land in Naivasha to build a dry port. We are also talking about extending the railway line from Kisumu all the way to Uganda. Now, there is a tweet from Louis Kipkoech Patrick, who says, this is how it's been going, the negotiations between Kenya and Uganda. Now, Uganda, 1, export chickens to Kenya. Kenya, number 1, we've agreed to work together. Uganda, 2, export more eggs to Kenya. Uhuru's side, we've agreed to work together. 3, export sugar to Kenya, Uganda. Kenya, we have agreed to work together.
And we'll triple it.
And number 4, Uganda, we get land in Naivasha to build a port. Number 4, in Kenya, we've agreed to work together. And it's so easy to see this kind of sentiments, why they have a hold, because you don't hear much about what we are supposed to gain as a country. You've heard us talking about importing more sugar from Uganda and giving them land to construct a dry port. What is Kenya getting out of this bilateral discussions between Uhuru and Museveni?
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that because remember, we're talking about People who sell eggs will tell you, and I talked about this in my explainer last week. I mean, eggs from Uganda are flooding the market. But even when you take a look at it, like you rightly said, you know, Uganda is Kenya's biggest trading partner. And it was only just last year in July that Kenya, for the first time, imported more goods than it sold to Uganda in the 5 months leading up to May. If you take a look at Uganda being the biggest buyer of Kenyan goods, making orders worth up to 61.9 billion shillings from Nairobi last year alone. There's a huge balance of trade here. And like you talk about, there's all of these things that are coming in with the sugar sector being on its knees, where we're trying to find out what will happen to Mumias and a number of these other sugar factories. In fact, you remember there was that meeting between Raila Odinga, the ODM leader, and Mwangi Kiunjuri, and then they went on their task force to Kisumu to take a look at what was happening there. So these are some of the interesting things. And I just wanted to add on to what Jamila said about the EAC and where it is. Because while we take a look at Uganda and Kenya, but it's also the wider context of what's happening. Uganda coming to Kenya at the time when there's a huge border row with Rwanda. But this is what the former EAC Secretary General, Ambassador Mwapachu, had to say. He said the EAC remains predominantly a community of trade and economic relationships, not one of people. It is still yet to be felt by you and me what being part of the EAC community really means. What is there to show for it at a very personal level? You know, are we able to trade much? You know, do we have many people doing trade between these countries? And remember, there are now, what, 6 countries with over 160 million residents. It's a big community. But
and when it comes, just adding to what Yvonne is saying, when it comes to communities, whether it's the East African community, whether it's COMESA, whether it's the SADC, whether it's the European Union, the nations, individual nations' interests come first.
Absolutely.
Look at what Britain is doing right now. They're still battling to leave the EU, but they want a deal.
Yeah. They don't want to live with nothing.
So it's very clear when you see the anger of some Kenyans, like Kangwana Vaite saying, Dennis Kangwana saying, what is Kenya gaining from this bilateral agreement? They are right to get angry because you have to feel, you have to see what is in it for my country first. It's not always about the other country. I know you were in
Mombasa yesterday. Yes.
And there was a question that is very, very key for Kenyans. What is happening in Migingo?
That is happening in Migingo. It was one of only 2 questions that were asked yesterday.
The Migingo question won't go away because Kenya insists this is our land. Today I was speaking to former Nyanza PC Joseph Kaguthi, and he was telling me that he clearly knows and understands where the beacons are, where the boundaries are, and there's no doubt about where Migingo lies. It is Kenya's. But now, how Kenya claims this from Uganda and the procedure of claiming it is the issue. Because, I mean, look, every so often we are doing stories here of Kenyan fishermen being arrested and being detained by Uganda military officers in Migingo. And even the local leadership in that region insisting that the government needs to do something about this parcel. So probably we need, as a community, to tell each other the truth about some of these things, even as we find a solution. This issue has been pending for how many years?
For a long
9
time,
years or so?
Yes,
and a quick one, Francis. The biggest issue here is why the discrepancy in how Kenya reacts when it comes to some of these territorial questions. Just the other day with Somalia, we were showing all this bravado. There was a lot of grammar from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You know, we were speaking like a very brave nation. But when it comes to Migingo, we sound like what Ugandans call our sister nation of Kenya. Very sisterly, very...
Not very nice.
Not very brotherly. In gender terms, we are the sister, they are the brother. I mean, especially when it comes to Migingo, we are unassertive, we are not clear. Look at the president's answer yesterday, and I don't know whether we have it, Robert. I don't know whether we have the president's answer to the Migingo question.
No, I don't think we have it.
Again, it's the usual... You know,
Kizungu Mingi.
There'll be a committee that will be formed.
That will discuss whether that's an issue.
The ministers,
Why didn't we do the same with Somalia? We were even recalling the ambassador, and theirs was also going back.
But when we talk about Migingo, I think a lot of people need to understand why Migingo is important. This all started about 15 years ago, and I think at the time, the Ugandan government deployed its security forces to guard that area. It was because apparently there were armed pirates who were terrorizing the fishermen in that area. Now, the Ugandans set up a strategic good surveillance base because of that, and in 2004, they had cleared the pirates from that area. And people started settling in that place. And you know, that area, the waters around Migingo Island is rich with Nile perch.
Yes.
And in fact, some of the fishermen would tell you, I was reading an article, and they're saying actually the Ugandan forces coming in there and Akwatoa pirates really helped them able to continue with their work. Yeah. But now, you remember in 2005, that's when issues started coming about Migingo, because before 2005, not many people knew about Migingo, not it was all about. Now, people started getting a lot of interest because of the fish that people were getting from the waters. In fact, at one point, ilisemekana kwamba the land belongs to Kenya, but the water around it belongs to Uganda. Museveni himself. But you know, he said that after there was actually a group of Kenyans and Ugandans, a team of surveyors who were brought together from both countries. And it was during President Kibaki's reign, and it was funded. It was actually a funded project worth about 140 million. They had ultra-modern boats, they had self-contained rooms, they had computers to actually try and find out hii Migingo ni ya nani. And the report from that exercise was never released.
I want us to also talk about, because you mentioned Kenya's position and whether we seem to backtrack or cout Uganda, not just on the issue of Migingo, but you remember there was that oil pipeline from Kenya to Uganda. In May 2016, Uganda backtracked on its earlier pledge to use the Kenya oil pipeline to transport its oil to Mombasa. In fact, they found what they termed was a cheaper route through Tanzania.
Tanga, yes.
And then, not only on that, but even with SGR, which now, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but now, you know, they closed ranks on the need to extend it, you know, to the border, and therefore going in, and of course the dry port. But they have been differing over financing of the SGR to the point that this was put on hold until this trip that came along. And then here we again conceding land in Naivasha to Uganda to be able to do that. And then to just have more goods on rail. I think we have that clip with Uhuru and Museveni talking about the SGR. We know he used it. The way he talked about more goods on the rail and you know, possibly using Lake Victoria. Let's listen.
Once again, we invite Uganda to join us in the joint development, continued development of the SGR.
In the coming years, a lot of cargo will move from the roads to the railway, and fuel will move from the roads to the pipeline and across the lake to the tugboats, which can carry the fuel across the lake.
So Kenya may be the biggest economy, and we may be the big brother, but you know, does it show in
no, it doesn't show. It doesn't show. What is showing more is Uganda's conscience that they are a landlocked country, and that they really need a sea route, whichever way. Is it through the lake? Is it through the land? Is it through the cheapest route, which they suggested at the time is Tanzania? But what we've seen in the last maybe 15 years is our foreign policy is not as robust as it used to be. We are not as assertive in protecting our trade or security or territorial interests as we used to be. There were some conversations that were impossible to imagine under President Jomo Kenyatta and under President Daniel Arap Moi. You cannot discuss the boundary of Kenya. You cannot raise questions about where the land of Kenya ends. But after 2002, we've been very casual about foreign policy. We've been less robust. And what happens when you have a weak foreign policy environment? Also, the bargaining power on trade issues does not begin to happen.
In fact, somebody, Eli Bwire on Twitter, is saying the key agenda about Museveni visit plus all the pampering is about investing in the Naivasha land, quote unquote. And then he's asking, who owns that land?
Very good question.
Yeah.
Whose land is it?
Yeah, whose land is it?
Yes.
Here we go. And what you're talking about guarding our border, I recall, and because you're the custodian of history on this panel, when Ugandans came in to the border through, was it West Pokot?
Yes.
And they took some of our cattle. I distinctly remember President Moi saying, "I want my cattle
By midday.
back." And indeed, and
The
he had
cows
talked
came
about, we'll have our jets, we'll have everything at the border, and it took just that warning, and everything was returned. But even as we talk about, maybe it's time to talk about the role of communities such as this EACC, COMESA, SADC, in a growing trend of nationalism around the world, even with Brexit and whatever is happening. But even with all of that, I just want to talk about Charles Onyango Bo, who says, he's had this extensive, I don't know if you read it, series.
Yeah, he's had a series
in
about East Africa, yes.
And this is the man who has, vast knowledge on the region. But he is very optimistic about the EAC. He says it's still in good shape, even though more and more East Africans do not think so. He gives an example. Uganda produces 5 million bags of maize, but only consumes 1 million. What would happen to the rest of the 4 million? It's all being sold within the EAC market. But he does say the EAC Secretariat should engage in more constituency building, raising awareness, especially amongst young people on board who form the majority of the populations across the six. Things like creating annual prizes for EAC innovators. So, he's still hopeful of that. And even while he's doing that, can we talk about Uganda and Rwanda?
Oh, wow.
Because those two have a very deep history. And it's all now playing out. One was fighting in which army, and then they break away.
Uhuru has tried shuttle diplomacy.
Yes,
it didn't work.
Right.
I've covered both President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and indeed interviewed them. And whatever is happening between Rwanda and Uganda starts first as a personal tiff between Yoweri Museveni and Paul Kagame.
Yeah.
Now, they have a very long relationship. You know very well that the Rwandan Patriotic Front was formed in Uganda before it went into Rwanda in October 1990 to begin the liberation war that ended in RPF coming to power in July 1994. Now, at some point, Paul Kagame was serving in the ranks of the military in Uganda.
Yes.
He was at some point the head or the chief of military intelligence, and his boss was Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Now, there's something about the personality of Yoweri Museveni, and it shows, whether it's in Mombasa and Francis, you saw it. He is a domineering individual.
Absolutely.
He is patronizing. He dominates the room. He wants to be recognized as the big one. Now, Rwanda is an independent state, and Paul Kagame is no longer serving as a junior under Yoweri Museveni, which is a recognition that doesn't seem to have come between these two. In 2001, I think, I covered a war between Rwanda and Uganda in Kisangani, Congo.
Yep.
Again, it was down to this contempt issue of who is superior, which country has a greater force, who is the regional powerhouse when it comes to the military. So some of the tension between Rwanda and Uganda is sourced, or it's coming from the personal space of Yoweri Museveni and Paul Kagame. If Yoweri Museveni were to tone down and treat his fellow heads of state as fellow heads of state and not their juniors, like he does even in Mombasa.
Uhuru, but he has been the president. Uhuru has been president since 2013,
and
Yoweri has been since 1986,
and he's set to carry on.
And he's still set to carry on. So
this is his third president in Kenya.
Third president. He's actually, I was saying that he's had that meeting with the Kenyan president as in a foreign visit enye iko mkutano ambao ni rasmi with 3 presidents already, with Daniel Arap Moi, with Mwai Kibaki, and now with Uhuru Kenyatta.
Call him president for life,
Yep.
Same in Rwanda. Kagame is there for quite a while. Actually, he will be there for quite a while. I don't know whether that will be the case here. I don't know. Maybe that's a story for another day.
That will never happen in Kenya.
I hope it doesn't.
It won't.
I hope it doesn't.
You can.
The only problem is that everything in politics is possible. Actually, you can call politics the art of the impossible.
No, the cultural environments differ. Uganda politically is operating exactly the same way we were operating in the 80s where we had this infallibility of the leader, long live, you know, until you decide when to go. Our constitutional arrangement is very different. Our democracy, imperfect as it is very, very robust. It's thoroughly noisy. We want to impeach a deputy president. We want to separate the president and his deputy. It's crazy here.
But Linus, you remember
Museveni wouldn't run Kenya.
There has been a discussion not so long ago of Uhuru Kenyatta is still very young. Where is he going to? You remember that discussion?
But I also
I hope that direction, that discussion does not end.
We have a referendum coming up. We have a referendum.
Don't forget, there were those who were telling President Moi, you're still too young.
You need to continue after 2002.
What do we do? You know.
Okay, but so you know, when you think about it, Rwanda and Uganda have also had some very interesting histories with coups. I mean, and Rwanda is exceptional, you know, across the world. But even to just talk about the espionage, you know, accusations that have been traded between, you know, Kampala and Kigali, people have been deported, people have been removed. And you know, they also have very close family ties and business ties as well, when you think about what's happening between Rwanda and Uganda. And that remains unresolved, considering the fact that Rwanda is now the chair of the EAC, you know, the rotational right now.
An interesting tweet coming from Brian Toel. He's saying, you guys, why are you calling it a bilateral? It was actually a monolateral. And by the I don't know whether you took note of the Webuye pan paper question.
Yes.
And the response. I saw a lot of discussion around it. And I don't know why I felt, because I was there, looking at the president and as Museveni was speaking, you could see some discomfort, even whispering
because
that
he's basically mocking Kenya.
Yeah.
He was mocking us, yes.
Yeah.
You're saying Uganda is spending $132 million to import paper, karatasi, and $800 million to import textile. Actually saying that they're importing paper from Finland, a country where it takes 120 years to grow one tree.
Oh, wow.
So why can't we get our act together, bring up pen paper so that Uganda can purchase paper from us?
Despite
so
all
very
these
interesting
issues,
discussions
Francis and Yvonne and Linus, we actually had some really, really good